The scissors made a sound she would not forget. Not the clean, decisive sound of scissors, cutting through something with purpose. A tailor's scissors, a surgeon's scissors, something used with intention and skill. This was a different sound. The sound of blades moving through fabric that resisted, that pulled, that tore, rather than cut, because the scissors were large and the silk was structured, and the woman holding them was not a professional, but a person making a statement. The dress fell in pieces, not metaphorically, literally in pieces, onto the marble floor of the bridal suite of St. Christopher's Church on the Upper East Side, a floor of pale Carrara marble that had been polished for this occasion and that now held, scattered across its surface, pieces of ivory silk that had been hand-embroidered in 1962 by a woman whose name Clara had learned because she had cared to learn it, who had spent 4 months on the bodice alone, whose work was now in fragments at the feet of a woman in a Givenchy cocktail dress holding a pair of scissors and looking at the destruction with the expression of someone who has made a point and is satisfied with the making of it. Valentina Hearst lowered the scissors. She looked at Clara. "Now you look like what you are," she said. "What would you do if this were you? If you were standing in a bridal suite 20 minutes before your wedding, in the ruins of a dress that had been irreplaceable, not because of its cost, which was not extraordinary, but because of what it was, a vintage piece from a shop on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré that she had found herself, alone on a Tuesday afternoon, that had fit her, without alteration, as though it had been waiting. If you were standing in pieces of it, and the woman with the scissors was your future sister-in-law, and behind her were 3 more women with the specific, satisfied expressions of people who have organized an event and watched it produce its intended result, what would you do if, when the door opened and your fiancé walked in, he looked at the floor and looked at his sisters and looked at you and said, not with anger, not with protection, but with the managed composure of a man who has already made a calculation, "They have a point, Clara. You should have listened to them about the dress. Put something on that isn't embarrassing." Clara looked at the marble floor. She looked at the ivory silk. She looked at her fiancé, whose name was Dominic Hearst, who was standing in the bridal suite doorway in his wedding suit with the expression of a man who has just said the thing that cannot be unsaid and is waiting to see what it produces. It produced silence, a very specific silence. The silence of a woman who has arrived without ceremony at the end of something. She reached into the small beaded bag that was lying on the dressing table. She took out a phone, not her regular phone, the other one, the one that was matte silver rather than black, and that she had carried for 3 years without using because she had told herself she was building a life that didn't require using it. She pressed a single contact. It rang once. A voice answered. The voice of a man who answers this specific number immediately, regardless of what he is doing, because the condition under which this number might ring is the condition he has been maintaining readiness for across 3 years of patience. She said one sentence, in the language of the country she had been born in, the language that no one in this bridal suite understood except her. She ended the call. She set the phone on the dressing table. She looked at Valentina's scissors. She looked at Dominic. She looked at the pieces of the dress, and she was entirely still, in the specific, total way of a woman who has made a decision that is irrevocable and has moved fully and without residue to the other side of it. Dominic said, "Clara, don't," she said. Just that word. She was not going to cry. She was not going to shout. She was going to wait, and the waiting was a matter of minutes. And the minutes were going to be the last ordinary minutes this building would contain for quite some time. Her name was not Clara Webb. That was the name she had been using for 3 years, with the specific, careful attention of someone who has constructed an identity not to deceive, but to discover, to create the conditions under which discovery was possible. Her actual name was Princess Clara Adelaide Marguerite of the House of Sternmark, Crown Princess and sole heir to the Principality of Steiermark, a sovereign state in Alpine Central Europe with a population of 2,300,000 people, a constitutional monarchy that had governed continuously for 5.5 centuries, and a treasury that analysts described, when they described it at all, as operating at a scale that makes conventional wealth comparisons imprecise. She had left when she was 24. The decision had been forming for 2 years before she executed it, and the execution had required 6 months of preparation because she was someone who prepared for significant decisions with the comprehensive attention of someone who understands that preparation is itself a form of respect for the decisions important. The decision had several components, all of them real, all of them necessary to understanding why she did what she did. The first component was the simplest to articulate. She had grown up in a world where her identity preceded her in every room she entered. She had never, not once in 24 years, been in a space where she was simply Clara, where the specific, particular person she was had been the first thing encountered rather than the title, the position, the institutional weight of what she represented. She wanted to know whether the particular person she was someone that other people would choose without the institutional weight attached. The second component was more complex and more personal. She had watched her parents' marriage, her father's devotion to her mother, the specific quality of it, the way he had chosen her mother in a context where no choosing had been required, where the arrangement had been made by other people and had made the choosing anyway, daily, with the full conviction of someone who is choosing rather than occupying a role. And she had understood from watching this what choosing looked like. She wanted to be chosen. Not assigned to, not strategically allied with, not married for the consolidation of positions she had not asked to represent. Chosen by a person who knew her as a person. The third component she discussed only with her brother, Prince Matthias. On the evening before she left, she said, "I am afraid of becoming someone who doesn't know themselves without the institution. I need to know that I exist outside it." He had looked at her for a long time. Then he had said, "The emergency line. Always." She said, "Always." He said, "Come back when you're ready." She said, "I'll know when." She became Clara Webb. She had a genuine master's degree in art history from an institution where she had enrolled under a different name during the preparation period, and she found a position at a small private archive in Manhattan that specialized in the acquisition and preservation of rare architectural drawings, the working documents of significant buildings, the handmade plans and elevations and cross-sections that preceded the structures they described, that were themselves the record of a human mind working through a problem that mattered. She loved the work. She loved it in the way she had loved things her entire life, with the complete, specific attention of someone for whom loving a thing means understanding it as fully as possible. She met Dominic at an auction, a small house auction at Christie's, for a private collection of 20th century architectural drawing, and she had gone in her professional capacity. The archive was interested in 2 of the lots, and Dominic had gone because his company developed commercial real estate, and he maintained a practice of attending auctions adjacent to his work, even when the auctions were not directly commercial, because he believed in the value of knowing the field you operated in at a level beyond the immediately operational. He stood beside her in front of a large preparatory drawing for a building by Louis Kahn, the drawing in graphite on drafting paper, the lines of it speaking a language that she had been learning to read for several years, and that she discovered in the 20 minutes before the auction began, had been learning independently. He said, "The relationship between the served and servant spaces is clearest here." He was pointing to the section drawing, to the way the circulation was drawn in relation to the inhabited rooms. It was a precise and specific observation. It was also the observation she had been about to make. She said, "Yes, and the section reveals something the plan conceals." She pointed to the cross-section. "Here." He looked at it for a moment. He said, "You're right." He said it in the simple, direct way of someone who finds being shown something they hadn't seen more interesting than defending the position they had. She gave him her number after the auction. He had won one of the lots she was interested in. She had let it go at the price it reached, which exceeded the archive's acquisition limit, and she had given him her card because she wanted the drawing to go somewhere it would be understood, and he seemed like someone who would understand it. He called the following day, not about the drawing, about coffee. He was 31, 2 years older than her, and he had the quality she was looking for and had not found reliably before. He was curious without performing curiosity, interested in things for themselves rather than for what they communicated about his interest. He built things. Literally, his firm developed commercial and mixed-use projects in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and was beginning a project in Philadelphia that he talked about with the specific, absorbed enthusiasm of someone for whom the work is genuinely the thing, rather than the metric of the thing's success. She fell in love with him slowly, and then completely. This was how she fell in love with things, by attending to them carefully over time, until the attention resolved into certainty. The certainty, when it arrived, was not dramatic. It was simply the recognition of something that had been there for some time and had finally been fully seen. He was not hiding anything. This was the quality she loved most, the specific quality of a man who was the same person in every context, who did not manage impressions because he had decided that the management of impressions was a cost he was not willing to pay. He argued with her when he disagreed, which he did with some regularity, because she had strong opinions and he had strong opinions, and the conversations between two people with strong opinions who are capable of revising are the best kind of conversations. He was present in the way she needed, the kind of presence that is not performance, but simply the condition of being with someone, because being with them is where you want to be. She did not tell him the truth. She had mapped the conversation, knew its shape, knew when it needed to happen, held it prepared, and waiting for the right moment. The right moment kept not arriving in the clean way she had imagined, and then it became harder to deliver because it had become retroactive, and she told herself she would tell him before the engagement. And then he proposed on a Sunday morning in the apartment they had moved into together in Tribeca, with the light coming through the windows at the angle she had found herself organizing her mornings around. And she said yes. She told herself before the wedding. She did not tell him before the wedding. She told herself she would tell him on the other side of the wedding, when they were married, when the foundation was established, when the truth would be received by someone who knew her completely, rather than by someone for whom the truth would change the shape of everything they had built. She was wrong to wait. She knew this with the clear, honest assessment she brought to her own failures. She had been wrong, and the wrongness had a cost, and the cost was arriving now, in the specific form of scissors and silk on marble. Dominic's family, he had 3 sisters, Valentina, 34, who ran the Hearst family's philanthropic foundation with the managing energy of someone for whom philanthropy is a domain of social influence rather than genuine charity. Roxanne, 32, who worked in fashion and wore this fact on every surface of her appearance. The Givenchy, the Chanel earrings, the handbag, whose specific model was a code that people fluent in the language of expensive handbags could read instantly. And Phoebe, 29, who was the youngest and in certain ways the most revealing, because she had not yet developed the sophistication that covered the substance, and the substance was a specific, functional cruelty dressed as aesthetic judgment. Their mother, Vivian Hearst, was a woman of 60 who had built the Hearst family's position across 4 decades through a combination of her husband's commercial success, Gerald Hearst, commercial real estate, now retired, and her own specific, sustained social intelligence, which was the intelligence of someone who understands that position is maintained through the management of other people's perception rather than through the accumulation of anything real. She had white hair worn in a style that required a specialist. She wore Dior and had for 30 years. She had the specific quality of a woman for whom the performance of distinction had been the primary activity of her adult life for so long that she could no longer distinguish the performance from the thing. Clara had met Vivian at the first family dinner, a Sunday lunch at the Hearst House in Greenwich, a house with a view of the Sound and the specific, maintained quality of a property that has never been allowed to be anything less than the image of itself. And Vivian had looked at her with the assessment expression from the moment she arrived and had not removed it for the duration of the meal. The assessment's conclusions were communicated not through direct statement, but through the specific, sophisticated mechanism of everything adjacent to it. Vivian asked about the archive with the interested tone of someone asking about a hobby rather than a profession. She asked about Clara's family with the curious tone of someone whose curiosity was actually mapping. Where was she from, exactly? What did her parents do? Was she close to them? Clara had answered with the fluency of someone who has practiced these answers and given them many times. She was from Europe. Her family was in Switzerland. Her parents were in private life. She was close to them in the way that adult children are close to parents who live in another country. Vivian absorbed all of this and said nothing that was directly dismissive. She didn't need to. The dismissal operated through texture, the small pause before responding to Clara's statements, the slight redirection of the conversation towards subjects in which Clara had no history to reference, the specific warm attention Vivian directed at every other person at the table, and the specific, courteous absence of attention she directed at Clara. Valentina was more direct. At the second family gathering, an engagement party at the Hearst apartment in the Pierre, Valentina had come to stand beside Clara at the drinks table and had said, with the warmth of someone who considers candor a gift, "I hope you understand what you're taking on. This family has a position to maintain. Dominic's career requires, there are expectations. The wives in this family aren't decoration. They're active participants in the project." She had looked at Clara's dress, a navy silk, well-made, nothing obscure about its quality if you knew to look, and she had added, "We can help you with the wardrobe, the presentation. It's not personal, it's practical." Clara had said, "Thank you. I'll let you know if I need help." Valentina had smiled the smile of someone who has offered something and had the offer declined and has decided that the declining confirms the need. "Of course," she said. "Of course you will." The months of the engagement were the months of the education. The education was in the specific, sustained, sophisticated form of micro-hostility that operates through omission and implication. The group message thread for wedding planning that Clara was added to a week after it was created. The vendor recommendations that arrived from Vivian with the specific framing of suggestions that were actually corrections, each one carrying the implication that Clara's own choices were inadequate in ways that Vivian was too well-bred to name directly. The conversation at a family dinner where Valentina had said to Roxanne, within Clara's easy hearing, "She doesn't have people in New York. She doesn't have anyone. It's going to be such an uneven wedding." Dominic had been present for several of these moments and had managed them with the specific technique of managed non-intervention. He deflected, changed the subject, said to Clara afterward that his family was complicated and that she should try not to take things personally because they were like this with everyone, and it was just how they were. Clara had said, "It's not how they are with each other. It's specifically how they are with me." He had said, "I know. I'm working on it. Just, can you give me a little more time? The business deal in the spring, I need them aligned right now. I can't afford a family conflict," she had said. "And when the deal is done," he had said, "then I'll have more room to manage it." She had said, "All right." She had given him the room. She had given him the room in the spring and through the summer and into the fall. And the room had been inhabited by incremental withdrawal on his part and incremental escalation on his family's part. And the alignment she was giving him the space to maintain was maintained at her expense. And she had documented this with the patient, comprehensive accuracy of someone who is building a record, not because she was planning to use it specifically, but because documentation was what she did when she needed to understand a situation fully. The wedding had been organized primarily by Vivian, which was not the arrangement Clara had wanted, and was the arrangement she had agreed to, because the agreement was the cost of the room she had been giving Dominic for the alignment. The church was St. Christopher's, which was the Hearst family church, where Dominic's parents had married and his grandparents before them, and which was the church they would be married in, regardless of whether it was the church Clara would have chosen, because the church was not about Clara's preference, but about the Hearst family's continuity, which was not explained to her, but was simply established as the fact of the situation. The dress she had chosen herself. She had gone alone to the shop on the Rue de Faubourg Saint-Honoré on a trip to Paris that she had organized specifically for the purpose, not wanting the company of women who would manage her choice toward their preference. She had found the vintage piece, ivory silk, hand-embroidered bodice, the work of a woman whose name she had researched after finding the dress, a couturière who had worked in the 1960s and whose archive was held by a textile museum in Lyon. The dress fit without alteration. She had known immediately. She had carried it back to New York in a garment bag she did not let out of her hands on the plane. She had shown it to Dominic. He had said it was beautiful. She had believed him. The morning of the wedding, she had been in the bridal suite, a room the church provided for exactly this purpose. Pale marble and good mirrors and warm light from sconces that the church had installed with the understanding that the people in this room were in the most significant hour of their lives and deserved the support of its physical environment. And she had been looking at the dress on the mannequin and thinking about her brother, about the call she would make when it was done, when she was married, when the truth she owed Dominic had been told and received, and they were on the other side of it together. She had been thinking about this when the door had opened. All four of them, Valentina, Roxanne, Phoebe, and a woman she didn't recognize who was holding scissors and who she understood in the 2 seconds of seeing the scissors in a context that had no reasonable explanation for them, had been brought specifically. The dress, Valentina had said. We told you it was wrong. You didn't listen. It's a vintage piece, Clara had said, from a couturière who... It's a second-hand dress, Roxanne said, at the wedding of a Hearst. Leave, Clara had said. Phoebe had laughed. Not the good kind of laugh, the specific laugh of someone who has been given permission by the presence of older women who are doing something to do the thing she has always wanted to do and has been waiting for the authorization of company. And then the scissors. She had not moved fast enough, or she had decided not to move. She would think about this afterward, whether the not moving was a failure of response or a recognition that this exact moment was the thing that needed to happen for everything else to be possible, and that preventing it would have prevented everything that followed. She would not resolve the question. She would hold both possibilities simultaneously. The scissors went through the silk in 3 cuts. Large, efficient cuts. The cuts of someone who knew how to make them, rather than someone who was hacking at something. Valentina, she understood. Valentina had done this deliberately and with skill. The dress fell in pieces on the marble, and then the door had opened, and Dominic had entered and said what he said, and Clara had gone entirely still. She pressed the contact on the phone. She said the sentence. She put the phone down, and now she waited. The sound arrived in 8 minutes. Not the sound of one vehicle, many, coming from the direction of Fifth Avenue, audible through the church's thick stone walls in the specific building vibration quality of large engines decelerating together in the coordinated way of a convoy that has arrived at its destination and is completing its approach. The sound grew for approximately 90 seconds, and then it stopped, replaced by the specific post-arrival silence of many large things that have become stationary. Dominic, who was still standing in the bridal suite doorway, heard it. He turned toward the sound. He said, "What is that?" Clara didn't answer. The church's main doors, at the end of the nave, where 240 guests were seated in the pews, opened. Not the side door, not the sacristy entrance. The main door, both of them, simultaneously, pushed open from outside with the coordinated force of people who have been positioned on both sides of them and have received their signal. 40 men in formal attire entered the church. The Sternmark Royal Household Guard wore dark navy, almost black, with the Sternmark Mountain Eagle in silver at the lapel, and they moved through the church in 2 columns of 20, taking positions along the walls of the nave and at every exit with the practiced, unhurried efficiency of people for whom this function is the primary language of their professional lives. The guests in the pews, 240 people who had been waiting for the procession to begin, who were in the comfortable suspension of pre-ceremony anticipation, watched this with the collective, suspended quality of people who have been interrupted in a state of readiness and do not yet have the information they need to produce an appropriate response. Vivian Hurst, in the 3rd pew from the front, on the bride's side, which was a pew that contained primarily the archives director and Clara's 2 closest friends in New York, because she did not have many people in the city and she had not wanted to fill the pew with acquaintances. Vivian was standing, which was the wrong thing to be doing in a church during the positioning of 40 armed security personnel, but she was a woman who stood when she was confronted with things she needed to manage, and she was clearly attempting to manage this. Then the side door of the bridal suite, not the main corridor door through which Dominic had entered, but the side door that connected to the service entrance of the church, opened, and 2 women entered. They were wearing the white and navy working dress of the Sternmark Royal Atelier, and they were carrying, between them, a garment that was enclosed in a protective cover of the kind used for objects of significant value. They crossed the bridal suite. They set the garment on the mannequin stand. They removed the protective cover. The wedding dress of the Sternmark Royal Atelier was a specific and documented object. It had been created in 1889 for the marriage of Princess Adelaide, Clara's great-great-grandmother, and had been worn by every Sternmark bride since who had chosen the tradition, 3 of them, each wearing it and returning it to the atelier, which maintained it as a living garment rather than an archive piece, ready to be worn again. It was ivory silk with a train of 4 meters. The bodice was handworked in seed pearls and silver thread by artisans whose names were recorded in the atelier's documentation. The value of it was not in the pearls or the silk or the silver thread. The value of it was in what it was, which was a garment that had been part of the most significant days of 5 women's lives over a century and a quarter, and that retained in its fabric and its workmanship everything it had witnessed. The 2 women from the atelier began to help Clara into the dress. Dominic was still in the doorway. He was looking at the women from the atelier. He was looking at the dress. He was looking at Clara with the expression of someone encountering a situation that does not map onto any available category of his experience. Valentina, who had been standing near the window with the scissors still in her hand, said, "What is this?" One of the atelier women looked at her with the specific, calm assessment of someone who has been briefed on the situation and has determined that the briefing was complete. She said nothing. Clara stepped into the dress. The atelier women worked around her with the efficient, practiced care of people who have done this before, for people who have done this before, and the dress settled onto her with the specific, structural quality of something that had been designed for the body of a woman rather than an abstraction of, and fitted to Clara by the atelier's chief dressmaker in a session 3 months ago in Sternmark that Clara had attended during one of her regular quarterly visits home, which she had explained to Dominic as family visits to Switzerland. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked at the dress and the person wearing it, and for the first time since she had left Sternmark 3 years ago to become Clara Webb, the person in the mirror was both of those people at the same time, without the division between them that she had been maintaining. She turned to the room. Dominic said, "Clara, what is happening?" She looked at him. She had loved him. She had loved him with the complete, Specific attention she brought to loving things, which was the full weight of herself rather than a portion of it. She had loved the man who had stood beside her at Christie's and noticed the thing she was about to notice. She had loved the man who argued with her on equal terms and revised his position when revision was warranted. She had loved the man who had been present in the way she needed. The unhurried presence of someone who is with you because that is where they want to be. She was looking at that man now, and she was looking at the man who had walked into a bridal suite and seen his fiancée's wedding dress in pieces on the floor and had said, "The sisters had a point." She was holding both of these men simultaneously and finding that the holding required her to make a determination about which one was real, and the determination was that they were both real, and the real of the second one made the first one insufficient. "I need you to go to the nave," she said. He looked at the dress. He looked at her. He said, "Where did that?" "Go to the nave," she said. "Wait for me at the altar." He went. He went with the stunned, compliant quality of a man who has encountered a situation beyond his current capacity to manage and is operating on the last available instruction. She looked at Valentina. Valentina, with the scissors still in her hand, with the Givenchy cocktail dress, and the expression that had been the expression of someone who had made a point and was satisfied, had a different expression now. The satisfaction had been replaced by something that was trying to be composure and was not quite managing it. The scissors had become, in the changed context of the room, simply a pair of scissors in a woman's hand. No longer a weapon that had been deployed, just an object held by someone in the wrong place, at the wrong moment. "Go to the nave," Clara said to Valentina. She said it with the same voice she had said it with to Dominic. The same register, the same level, precise tone. "All of you," Valentina said. "I don't know who you think." "Go," Clara said. They went. She stood in the bridal suite for 3 minutes after they left, alone with the atelier women who finished the last adjustments to the dress in a precise, professional silence. She stood, and she breathed, and she thought about what she was about to do, which she had understood since the phone call she had made while Dominic was still in the doorway, and possibly earlier, possibly since the Wednesday afternoon in the Tribeca apartment, when she had found Dominic standing in the kitchen with his phone in his hand and the expression of a man who has been managing something and is aware that the management is failing, and she had understood that what was failing was not a situation, but a person. She walked out of the bridal suite. She walked down the corridor. She walked through the side door into the nave. 240 people turned. She walked the length of the nave alone. No escort, no procession, just herself, walking the aisle in the Sternmark royal wedding dress, with the 4-meter train moving behind her, and the light from the church's stained glass windows falling across the ivory silk in the specific, colored fragments of a late October morning, filtered through glass that was several centuries older than anyone present. She reached the altar. Dominic was there. The priest was there. The church was entirely silent in the way that large spaces go silent when the silence is made by the combined will of everyone present. She stood at the altar. She looked at Dominic. She said, "My name is not Clara Webb." The church held its silence. "My name is Princess Clara Adelaide Marguerite of the House of Sternmark. I am the crown princess and sole heir to the Principality of Sternmark. I have been living under an assumed identity for 3 years, which was a decision I made for reasons that were genuine and that I will explain to whoever deserves the explanation." She looked at the 240 people in the pews, at Vivian Hurst in the front row, at Valentina, still holding the scissors. She had carried them with her into the nave, which was the specific, oblivious quality of someone who had ceased to register an object as remarkable once it had served its purpose. At Dominic's father, who had the expression of a man sitting in a church watching something he is going to need considerable time to process. She looked at Dominic. "I loved you," she said. "I want to be precise about this, because precision is something I owe you and have not always given you. I loved the specific person I believed you were. I believe that person existed. I believe it existed until this morning, when you walked into a room where your fiancé's dress had been cut into pieces by your sisters, and you told her the sisters had a point. She paused. That was the last piece of information I needed. I am sorry it arrived this morning rather than earlier. I am sorry for the timing of all of this, which is imperfect and which I own completely. She looked at the knave. She said, "There is also a business matter that needs to be addressed before these proceedings conclude." She reached into the fold of the train. There was a pocket sewn into the lining, which the atelier had known to include because it had been there for a century and a quarter. And she took out a document. She looked at Dominic. Hearst Commercial Development, your family's company. It was founded 12 years ago with an initial investment of $40 million from a private equity vehicle. The vehicle is administered through a trust instrument established by the Sternmark Crown Foundation. She looked at the document. The investment agreement includes a conduct clause, standard in sovereign family investments, that allows the foundation to exercise its right of recall on the full investment in the event of conduct by the receiving party that the foundation determines is contrary to the terms of the agreement. She looked up. The foundation has determined the recall is effective today. The legal documentation is being served to the company's registered address and to the relevant regulatory bodies as we speak. In the pews, Vivian Hearst made a sound. It was not a word. A recall of $40 million, Clara said, at compound interest over 12 years, in a company whose debt structure was constructed on the assumption that the investment was permanent, produces a specific and total financial consequence for the company. The foundation's attorneys will be available to discuss those consequences with the company's board. If the board is able to form a quorum, which may be difficult given the circumstances of the next several weeks. She folded the document. She put it back in the pocket. She looked at Dominic one last time. He was standing at the altar where they were supposed to be married in the specific stunned quality of a man who has been given, in 10 minutes, more information than his model of the world can accommodate. He said, "Clara," she said, "I need you to understand something. This is not a punishment for this morning, specifically. This morning was the last piece of evidence. The evidence was building for 2 years." She paused. "I am sorry for what was good, and I am clear-eyed about what was not." She turned. She walked back down the aisle. The train followed behind her. The light from the stained glass moved across it. The 240 people in the pews watched with the complete, absorbed silence of people witnessing something they have no existing framework for and are experiencing fully because there is nothing else to do. She walked through the main doors. The doors were held open by 2 members of the household guard. She walked through and into the October morning. The convoy was on the street. 12 armored vehicles, matte navy, the Sternmark Eagle in silver, arranged along the block with the patient, substantial authority of things that have been there and will continue to be there, regardless of what the world around them does. The guard positions extended from the vehicles to the church entrance in a corridor of bodies that communicated, without words, that the space between the church and the lead vehicle was now a specific and managed space. Her brother was beside the lead vehicle. He was wearing a coat over a suit, standing with his hands in his coat pockets, with the patient, present quality he had always had, the quality of someone who is waiting because the person they are waiting for will arrive when they arrive, and the waiting is itself a form of being with them. He looked at her. He looked at the dress. Something happened in his face that was private and that she understood completely. She walked to him. She took his arm. They stood for a moment before getting in. She looked at the church, at the stone facade, the doors still open, the shapes of people visible inside, some of them coming toward the doors to see, some of them still in their pews, the specific human recalibration of a large group of people who have been in a room where something has permanently changed. She looked at her brother. She said, in their language, "Shall we go home?" He said, "We shall." They got in. The door closed. The convoy moved. True power, she would think later, in the palace at Sternmark, in the room where she had grown up, and which was still hers, looking at the mountains through a window that had always had the right proportions. True power is not what happens when you reveal your title in a church on your wedding day. True power is what happened in the 3 years before, when she walked into rooms where no one knew what she was and found out who she was without it. What happened in the church was simply the world becoming accurate, the world catching up to a truth that had been true all along and was finally, completely, permanently visible. Did Dominic Hirst earn every consequence? The company recall? The $40 million at compound interest? The dissolution of an arrangement built on a foundation he had let his family demolish with scissors? If you felt the satisfaction of a train moving through a church and the doors of an institution closing behind someone who has made them smaller than they knew they were, then smash that like button right now. Share this story with someone who needs it today, and subscribe to this channel, because the stories of women who know exactly what they are, even when no one in the room has yet been allowed to know, it never run out, and every single one of them is worth every second of the watching.